Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallama ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Many thanks to Imam Sayyid Asad for the kind introduction and for the invitation. What I wanted to talk about today could also be titled Salat, Zakat and the Victory of Islam. And I want us to reflect upon really what these great institutions are that the Prophet ﷺ has left us upon, and what our duty is with regards to them, and what results in these lands and in the future if we were to serve these by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A few comments about myself. So I've spent the last good period of my life in studying and teaching in Islamic law. And recently I took on this position as Chief Executive of National Zakat Foundation. And many people have asked me why I made what looks like a very big jump from the classroom to this sort of charity management space. And I always answer the same way. It's that when I kept thinking about what Islamic law really is, what the Sharia really is, I reached the conclusion that all of it, as I'll be showing you today, is simply about institutions that bring us together as a community. And as we are together, then all the fruits, the justice, the wisdom, the beauty of Islam comes into the earth through these coming together of these institutions. And I felt that serving the pillar of Zakat was the most important thing I could do to be true to this tradition that I had been teaching. And that's why I made this jump, if you like. At the time of Sayyidina Umar, the Sahaba had this debate. People came to him and said, we need a calendar. All these other civilizations have a calendar from which some big event in their history from which they date their events. And so they had a discussion of what is the most significant event that we should make the beginning of our civilization. And they had various discussions, and it was so interesting that they decided to make the most significant event for the Islamic civilization to date itself, not the beginning of the Wahi, and not other many great things they could have chosen, but they chose it to be the Hijra of the Prophet ﷺ. This Hijra signifies the beginning of a new civilizational order on this earth. The Hijra signified the beginning of the order of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, his order, his civilization. What is the new plan for what the earth is going to look like? That's what started on this date. And with the consensus of the companions, that is the beginning of our calendar, which we date ourselves back to. Another really interesting thing also to show the significance of this moment is that just before it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took his Prophet ﷺ on the most amazing journey. In one night he took him to Jerusalem and he led all the prophets in prayer. And the same night Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took him to the heavens, to a place which no being can ever comprehend and no angel has seen. And so that event, you would have thought, is the greatest event and moment in the life of the Prophet ﷺ. But it wasn't the end of his mission. It wasn't. It was the beginning of this next stage. And it's this next stage we have to think about now. That great height, why did the Prophet ﷺ come back to earth after that? He came back to earth after that to strive and struggle to build civilization, Islamic civilization. What are the principles and purposes of this civilization? He said, alayhi salatu wasalam, Bunya al-Islamu ala khamsin. Islam is built on 5. These 5 pillars, which we often learn about as children, what I'd like to demonstrate is that these 5 pillars are not simply important things for ourselves as individuals, but these 5 pillars are the pillars that uphold the entire civilization that he brought, alayhi salatu wasalam. These are the supports of all of Islam. And if these pillars are seen to, that civilization that stands off the back of them, it stands strong. That's the civilization. When the Muslims spread in this incredible spread in the time of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, and they entered into the lands of Persia and the lands of Iraq and the lands of Sham at the time of Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and over into Egypt and over into North Africa. When Islam spread in this amazing way, in fact, Sayyidina Umar told them, don't mix with these people. Do you know that? He told them, make your own towns. He wanted to preserve their identity. And so the da'wah wasn't a da'wah of come and join us. It wasn't like that. It was, we are in charge. We're going to make justice. You go to your own courts. You follow your own religious people. Just pay these taxes. We will maintain safety and equality. And we're going to live here. And so they built their own towns in Iraq, in Kufa and in Basra. They built their own, its place in Egypt. It was called Fustat. They had their own settlements where they followed the Sharia and they lived together. The conversion to Islam in these lands didn't happen overnight. It happened over a period of time. But the conversion was strong, and the conversion was not reversed. And those lands are the heartlands of Islam. They used to be the heartlands of Christianity. They were the heartlands of the previous communities, and they remain down to this day the heartlands of Islam. Why did people convert? It wasn't forced on them. There wasn't even preaching sent into them. It was just follow your code. Why did they all convert over the centuries? It's because this civilization had a logic. It created an order that was so attractive. It created so much pride and dignity to be a Muslim in those lands that naturally over time people wanted to join this group. And the joining wasn't superficial because it remained. Let's look at another mass conversion. When the Mongols came, and it looked like they destroyed Islamic civilization, and they killed the Caliph, and they sacked Baghdad. They made their own order over there under the descendants of Hulaygu Khan. He was the one that killed the Caliph and destroyed Baghdad. He made his own civilization. They called it the Ill Khanate. What happened? 2 generations later, they converted to Islam, and the civilization thrived again. What is it in this civilization that it can conquer the conqueror? What is it in this civilization that when you come into a land, as long as you establish your community, even if it's by itself in Kufa, over time people want to join this group? This is our question today. What is the logic of this civilization? And I'm going to say it's built on 5 pillars. I want to explain why these 5 pillars are so great. If you look at Salat, first of all, Salat is something, it's the pillar of our personal life, without a doubt. 5 times a day, even if your son died in the morning and you're kicked out of your home in the evening, still you have to pray Asr and Maghrib and Isha, however destroyed you feel. If you become the president of the country and everyone wants to celebrate, still you got to stop and you got to pray Dhuhr and Asr and Maghrib and Isha. The cycle of the Salat in the daily life of the Muslim is incredible, what it signifies. But what I'd like to stress is the cycle of the Salat for the community of believers. Because Salat is something, it is the greatest institution in Islam. And I want to illustrate this. Because for the sake of Salat, we were told to pray in Jama'ah. This is the first thing. Salat is meant to bring us together regularly. For the sake of Salat, we were told to build Masjid. And the mosque is the greatest institution in Islam. When you talk about how you conquer the conqueror, it starts in the Masjid, and I will demonstrate this. The mosque is the first thing the Prophet ﷺ established in Medina, that this is the Masjid. It's the beginning of his civilization ﷺ on this earth. What is the Masjid? Why is it so powerful? What makes a Masjid a Masjid? It's a place of land. It's not the domes and the minarets. It's just simply that it's a place of land dedicated to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that no human being can say this is mine. If anyone says this is mine, then it's not Masjid. It has to be no one owns it. It's lillahi ta'ala. What's the power of that? It means that all human beings in that space are equal. It means that nobody can be excluded. It means I can come here for the first time. I don't live in Rochdale, and I don't at all feel like, oh, I don't belong here. This is the house of Allah, and I belong here because I'm the slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the power of the Masjid. We're all equal. No one can tell me that's not your spot, that's my spot. I can say, why? This is the Masjid, it's the house of Allah. So can you see what the Masjid does? It belongs to all of us. It makes us free. I can travel anywhere on the planet, and I know in any Masjid I'm going to be home. That's really powerful. What else does the Masjid create? It creates an understanding that what brings us together in this space It's not ethnicity or color or language or dress or profession or income. What brings us together in the masjid is that we all belong to Allah and His Messenger. Finish. The masjid creates ummah. The masjid says you are together in another identity, a new identity. That identity is very, very powerful. The masjid, historically, because it was a free space, it was the birthplace of all of Islam's great institutions. So the first gatherings of learning used to happen in the masjid. People of learning would gather and students would come. If the governor of Iraq gave a strange judgment, the resistance would be in the masjid. They would ask Abu Hanifa, what do you think about so and so? He'd say, no, this is batil, this is wrong. So the masjid was the seat of resistance as well. It was the seat of free circles of learning. And people had to understand that because it's a free space. And it was the place of the ulama. As the centuries unfolded, what happened in the masjid, a famous alim would make this pillar, like this pillar would be his pillar. And people would come and read ilm with him. And over time, people would travel from far. And so they'd make little like housing, like hostels around the masjid, so they could learn fiqh inside the masjid. Over time, this complex of the hostel plus the masjid, they made a new institution. They called it madrasa. And we can call it college or university. These universities were so powerful, you can't put it all into words. Because when the masjid gave birth to the university, these universities spread all over the Muslim world. You had them everywhere. Places dedicated to learning and housing and learning about the sacred law. When the Crusaders came to the Muslim lands, they came to Jerusalem, they learnt about the Muslim universities and the Muslim courts of law. And that was the beginning of coming back to these lands and establishing their universities, as non-Muslim historians write. In Oxford, in Bologna, they came to see how the Muslims did the institutes of law, and they built their inns of law here in England. The masjid gave birth to civilization. We cannot stress this enough. The great institutions here were influenced by the institutions there, and they all were born in the masjid. The masjid was the place in the classical fiqh where the qadi was meant to be in early Islam. So if you have a dispute with your wife and the wife says he's not feeding me, where is she meant to go? She comes to the masjid. And the qadi sorts the man out. As the books of fiqh have different things the qadi can do if the husband is not doing his job. If people have a dispute with the neighbor, you come to the masjid. And later on, the central masjid, then they made the courthouse separate as the place of justice. So this really is the dar of tawheed and the dar of adl and the dar of ihsan, and it's the bayt of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's just one part of salat, which is the makan of salat. So I want to illustrate, when you say bunya al-islamu ala khamsin, these five are the upholds of the entire civilization. And we'll come at the end what that means for our job here today. Let's look at the books of fiqh now. What the books of fiqh teach about salat as an order to teach us about our civilization. We've talked about the jama'ah. We've talked about the masjid. Let's look at other things within fiqh. Within the books of fiqh, we have the Salat al-Jumu'ah. Salat al-Jumu'ah is really powerful. In the classical fiqh, there was only meant to be one Jumu'ah in every city. There's only one Jami' masjid in Cairo, or that was meant to be the Jami' of Kufa, the Jami' of Basra. And the idea was all other mosques have to be closed. There's only one Jama'ah once a week. If you don't come to that Jama'ah, you haven't prayed Jumu'ah. So it forces the community to unite. And then the books of fiqh obviously anticipate them disagreeing about the aqeedah of the Imam. He's that kind, he doesn't do this, doesn't do that. That's why the books of fiqh say, don't worry, you can't choose him anyway. They said that the one who rules the town, the governor of Kufa for example, he has to appoint the Imam. So that everyone will just be compelled to pray behind this Imam. You like the aqeedah, you don't like the aqeedah, it doesn't matter. If you don't pray behind him, you don't have Jumu'ah. So it forces the people to gather. It forces the political authority to take part in Salat al-Jumu'ah. And so the Jumu'ah then conquers the society. Can you see that? It makes the politics and the community under Jumu'ah. And it makes them one collective. That's a very, very powerful institution for Jumu'ah to act in this way. And the importance of this unity, one Jama'ah for all the men in the town, and the duty of that was so strong, in at least the books of our Hanafi fiqh, they say even prisoners in prison should not be allowed to pray Dhuhr in Jama'ah. That's in our books of Hanafi fiqh. Why? There should be no sense of a computing Jama'ah, of any competition. There's one Jama'ah in this town. That's it. If you don't make this Jama'ah, you pray by yourselves. No idea there should be a breakaway from the community. And it's so powerful. That's all I wish to say. What Salat does in a society, and how it forces the political, the social, the civil, all to unite at least once a week in this public ritual. And what that indicates about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's plan for us, that we are strong if we're together, and the Salat is meant to teach us how to come together. Look how the Prophet ﷺ stressed so much, fill the gaps and straighten the lows, and don't make any disagreement come between you. The Salat is teaching us Jama'ah. The Salat is training us in Ummah. The Salat is the key to the victory. If you go on in the chapters of fiqh, we have Salatul Eid. It's just the same thing. One Jama'ah only, one Imam, the appointed Imam, and out of the town. So everyone can come under the sky to celebrate and worship, but also to be united in ritual. That's the power of Salatul Eid. If you're going to celebrate as the entire Ummah. No breakaways allowed, please. Not on this day. If you go on to the chapters of fiqh, we have a chapter on the Salatul Istisqa. It's a really amazing chapter about when there's no rain. And what they teach is when there's no rain, again, the political authority, if you like, the person in charge of the town is meant to instruct everybody to do like 3 days of fasting, to address all the wrongs amongst them, make sure you don't have any disagreements, address everything. Then they're meant to leave the town and go out together, again, Jama'atan, the whole town. And there they're meant to take the mothers, the babies, and even the animals. And what they describe in these books of fiqh is you're all out of town and everyone is crying and pleading in dua. And the cows are mooing and the sheep are buying and the babies are crying. And we're meant to make dua in that moment. Say, oh Allah, for the sake of the animals, for the sake of the crying babies, for the sake of the old people among us, please give us rain. And so the idea was we want to bring the most vulnerable, which includes, like I said, the babies, the animals, the old people, because it's through them we are now making dua. For the sake of the weak, please give us rain. But the idea is, again, it's a jama'ah. It's a jama'atan exercise. Everyone is instructed to go, and it's coordinated. And so even what the Salat is teaching us is, even in the calamities of this life, the calamities of nature, the difficulties we can't control, Salat is meant to unify us. And it's meant to channel our fears, and it's meant to bring us together in a plea to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what it means when you say Islam is built on these great institutions. If you go on in the chapters of fiqh, we have a chapter called Salat al-Khawf. And Salat al-Khawf is about how to pray in war. Now, when people are actively fighting, then you can't pray, because you're obviously actively fighting. The Prophet ﷺ, his companions, they missed, I think, Dhuhr and Asr on one of the heated days in the battle of the Khandaq. So when you're actively fighting, it's hard to pray on time. But in classical war, there was a time when there's no active fight. When their army is there, our army is there, and we're waiting to see. Maybe we're sending messages, maybe waiting to see who makes the first move. And so in this standoff, how do you pray? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explained this in Surah An-Nisa. And it's a very strange kind of prayer. When you hear it, you think, how is this a prayer? And the way this prayer works is as follows. The Imam of the army, and obviously in this verse it's the Prophet ﷺ, he leads the prayer with half of the Jama'ah. And the other half are meant to be standing facing the enemy. And he leads them in half the prayer. So let's say it's Dhuhr, we prayed Dhuhr today, right? So he prays, the Imam prays Dhuhr 4 rakahs, and one half of the army prays 2 rakahs with him. And then in the prayer, they walk out and they line up. And the other army comes, and they pray the second 2 rakahs with the Imam. And then they leave. And the other group comes, and they pray the 2 rakahs that they missed. and then they leave. And the other group come and they pray the other 2 rakahs that they missed, and then they're finished. This is Salatul Khawf. So they've all prayed 4 rakahs. But why is it like this? It's so that they shouldn't have to divide up in the army. Because if only half the army prays with the Prophet ﷺ, imagine you're with the Prophet ﷺ. This is a time of unity and he's the messenger of Allah. Would you want to be disagreeing and fighting? Why does he get to pray with the Prophet? I'm praying with so and so. Can you imagine the disagreement, the disunity at a time when unity is what's going to save you? And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made a special prayer so that the army will all pray behind one imam. And it involves moving around. They say you shouldn't talk, it will break the prayer, but moving is fine. You move, the Quran says make sure you have your weapons with you, and then you line up, there's moving, there's walking, all the things we normally don't associate with salat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed it for the sake of the unity of this group, and it's in Surah An-Nisa. It's not like it's an established sunnah. And in later times the ulama debated. Some of the ulama said it's only in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Muslims felt no, it's for all times, because in all times, in a time like this, you need to show everyone we're one jama'ah, we're not 2, and the salat is designed to enforce this. Let's carry on in the books of fiqh. You come to the end. You come to the salat of the eclipse is very similar. You're meant to pray with one jama'ah with the Jum'ah imam. Then you come to the salat of janazah at the end of the kitab of fiqh. Salatul janazah is about it's about community. That this man is from our community, or this woman is from our community. We have to honor this person. If we don't, we're all sinful. So Salatul Janazah is again a ritual to honor our members. The members the salat is bringing together, we have a duty of them afterwards. If we don't do that, we're all sinful. So again, it's a marking community. And right at the end, there's an interesting bab about the rebels, the people who do like terrorism against the Muslims, from the Muslims. How do you deal with them? That's the last thing they talk about in Kitab of Salat. And they say that Sayyidina Ali, when the Khawarij fought him, he buried them without washing them. And that's a symbol that whoever from the Jama'ah rises against the Jama'ah, we want to make a demonstration that they're not fully from us. They're Muslims, but they're not fully deserving of our respect, because the Jama'ah is sacred. And that was the ijtihad of Sayyidina Ali, and became the sunnah of the Muslims of how to deal with people, Muslims who rise up against the Muslims. So we've done a very quick journey in the Kitab of Salat, in a book of fiqh. What I'm trying to stress is, as you can see, why Salat is the pillar of our community, and why Salat is a school in unity, and why Salat makes the biggest institution of Islam, and why the Masjid is something, it's more important than any palace and any military center. It's this thing. It's this institution. All we have to think about now is how to serve it best, and we're going to come to this. If I move quickly on, and then we can come back, just a few things about the other pillars, and I'm going to come to Zakat. If you look at Ramadan and fasting, even fasting is a communal activity. The reason being is, it's the time when we eat together, because the Prophet ﷺ encouraged us to feed each other, right? And as a result, what's he setting the stage for? Lots and lots of communal eating. That's what Ramadan is. Lots and lots of coming together. Lots and lots of hands in plates, and sharing food, and knocking on doors, and sharing samosas, and all of that stuff. That's part of what he ﷺ set the foundation for. Ramadan is the time when the masajid are packed more than any other time, with extra prayers and extra qiyam and extra coming together. So Ramadan is actually a social activity as well. It's a social charge in our community, and it's important that the pillars have something to reboost what it means to belong. If you look at the hajj, that's clearly a communal activity. It's forcing us to leave our homes, to travel the land in what used to be a very difficult journey. People have to plan it for months. Or they make the journey for months. The hajj is forcing on governors to make sure that they have safety, and they make up, and they make sure that the lines are safe. So the hajj has a strong political element to it. to ensure safety and safe passage and safe conduct and treaties, and everyone can move in this great movement. And what are they moving for? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لِيَشْهَدُوا مَنَافِعَ لَهُمْ, that they can find all these benefits. And of the benefits of the hajj is seeing the mu'mineen. It's realizing that whatever trouble we're having off in Samarkand, or whatever trouble we're having off in Andalus, you come and you think, subhanallah, it's okay, we're part of a huge ummah, and if we are struggling in one place, others are thriving, and our job is just to pass on the amana to those who come next, and it reinforces us. Do you know, even the salat we pray by ourselves, we pray it in plural. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينَ اهْدِنَا الصِّرَاطَ الْمُسْتَقِيمَ. It's all plural. It means we worship you alone, we seek your help alone, guide us. And the ulama say, why is it in plural? It's to remind you that you're part of a jama'ah. You could be alone, you could be scared, you could be in prison, you could be oppressed. When you stand before Allah, you know there's an ummah that is with you, and there's a history that is with you. All of this is the seeds of civilization. I'm going to come to zakat. Zakat is part of this vision. Zakat is not simply charity now. Charity is something that Islam has stressed from the beginning. And the Meccan Quran, before there was any zakat was taught and revealed in Medina. When there was no zakat, the Quran was stressing again and again and again and again the haqq of the yatim, the haqq of the miskin, the haqq of the Ibn Sabil. Ibn Sabil we translate it as traveler, but traveler now is this sort of exotic label. The Ibn Sabil is the refugee, it's the alien, the one who's come and he doesn't know anybody. How much the Quran emphasized looking out for these people. How much the Quran emphasized that you might go to hell if you don't encourage others to feed the needy. For example, Surah Al-Haqqa, a person is, the people of hell are described, really stern message. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم خذوه فغلوه, seize him and tie him. ثم الجحيم صلوه, and then in the hell roast him. ثم في سلسلة ذرعها 70 ذراعا فاسلكوه, and this long chain tie him. Why? إنه كان لا يؤمن بالله العظيم ولا يحض على طعام المسكين. He didn't believe in Allah the Tremendous. He didn't urge people to feed the hungry. And so he's got no friends here today. فَلَيْسَ لَهُ الْيَوْمَ هَاهُنَا حَمِيمٌ. So the Quran is really clear, even in Mecca, and there's no zakat, that if people don't encourage others to feed the hungry, you might go to hell. Really strong messaging like this, not like soft messaging. And that's why even in Mecca it was understood, as in Surah Al-Ma'arij it says, what does it mean to be a believer? Who are these people? It says, الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ حَقٌّ مَعْلُومٌ لِلسَّائِلِ وَالْمَحْرُومِ. The believers were those who had a specific portion of wealth set aside for those in need, those who asked and those who weren't able to ask. So it was understood, if you're a believer, some of your wealth has to be for the needy. That was understood. But zakat is still more specific than this, and zakat is the pillar of Islam. So what is zakat? It's specifically, how is zakat different? Let's look at two constraints that the books of fiqh talk about. One is the fact that zakat is meant to be paid Muslim to Muslim. That's it. Just think about what this means and what I've been saying today. Zakat is the institution that tells the Muslims categorically, you are a family and you have to look out for each other and you have to take care of each other as a duty, as the most basic duty of Islam is to understand that the Muslims are a family. That's what the zakat is teaching. You have to look out for them. You have a duty to make sure if their kids are hungry, to feel that your kids are hungry. Can you see how if the salat brings us together to teach us we're an ummah, what zakat is doing is saying, okay, now you know this, know that you have to look out for each other now. You have to really be the ummah of care, the ummah of solidarity. That's why there's another constraint in the classical fiqh which says what? Zakat is meant to be paid in the area where you live. The classical fiqh only debated on this to the extent of saying, is this a fard or is this a sunnah? But they all agreed that the sunnah, the proper way of zakat, is it's meant to be paid in the place where you live. And you can understand why in what I'm presenting right now. Because it's meant to create within us a sense of duty to our ummah, where we live. Who are the people near us? To build real community. The sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, the civilization that's built on this, is a civilization of community. Islam is meant to be experienced in a brotherhood and a sisterhood. We have a duty to construct this brotherhood and sisterhood, and these pillars are showing us the way. If zakat is done properly, it means we all have a concern for people outside and people next door, so that we develop this knowledge, not as a nice thing, or he's a nice person, he likes to care for the neighbors, but as a duty of what it means to be a Muslim, is to develop this structure so that no one feels alone around us. They all understand that they have a place they can come to and find support. And we understand we have a duty to find these people. The Holy Quran makes this duty even more interesting, if you like, when it describes who are the most worthy of the sadaqat. In Surah Al-Baqarah, it says, these people, الَّذِينَ أُحْصِرُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ لَا يَسْتَطِيعُونَ دَرْبًا فِي الْأَرْضِ. They've kind of been, maybe they were traveling in the path of Allah, but they got stuck somewhere. Then it says about these people, يَحْسَبُهُمُ الْجَاهِلُ أَغْنِيَاءَ مِنَ التَّعَفُّفِ. The Jahil thinks these people have no need because they have self-restraint. تَعْرِفُهُمْ بِسِيمَاهُمْ. You will know these people from their mark. لَا يَسْأَلُونَ النَّاسَ إِلْحَافًا. They do not ask people for help again and again. They'll drop a little hint. You say, do you know? They say, no, it's fine. These are the people we especially are meant to be helping. Because why? Because what ultimately is all of this civilization for is to give people a sense of dignity to belong to this ummah. People are meant to hold their head up high and say, I'm a Muslim and I'm proud. I'm a Muslim and I'm so happy to be here. I'm a Muslim and I'm looked after. So dignity is of the great values. إِنَّ الْعِزَّ لِلَّهِ وَلِرَسُولِهِ وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. The izz, triumph, pride, dignity, pride in a good way, not pride in the bad way. Having a sense of triumph, if you like. This is Allah's and His messengers and for the believers. That's what we have to construct. So if you follow the rules fully now, from the Kitab and the Sunnah, people should not have to be forced to beg before they get helped. We have to set up a system where we catch people before they fall, before they end up on the streets begging. Otherwise, what's the point? If they already are begging, we've already failed. This is the challenge on us, to make the system really work. And so I just want us just to reflect a little bit on what our duty really is. Our duty is to serve these pillars. Our duty is to set up a system, a zakat system, where every Muslim in this country, why am I starting from this country? Because it's where we are. And that's why I said zakat wants our concern to move out from. So everyone around us should feel they're part of a system that's there for them. And every one of us knows we're part of a system, we have a responsibility to our brothers and sisters in this system. That's our duty. If we see this duty, what will happen? A few things will happen. If you look back in the history again, I told you the Salat gave birth to the great institutions, social institutions of Islam. If you look at Zakat at the age of the Prophet ﷺ and the age of the early caliphs, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with them, Zakat was something emphasized incredibly. It was the most important source of public support. Lot of emphasis. That's why Sayyidina Abu Bakr went to war with anybody who dared hold back Zakat. This was war for the sake of the poor, not for the sake of anybody's pocket. That's powerful as well. What did the Zakat do with all of this emphasis? It laid the foundation for this izz of what it means to belong to this community. Like I said, the conversion happens because you want to belong to this group, and the group is looked after and the group is cared for. Later on, when you fast forward into Islamic history, you fast forward by a few centuries, Zakat is not talked about in a very strong way that's all over the place like it was in the early period. Something else is talked about all over the place. What's the other institution? It's called the Waqf. The Waqf is an endowment. What's a Waqf? It's like a Masjid. Masjid is like a Waqf, you dedicate to Allah. So what was the Waqf? It's people, let's say someone's a business owner, someone's a landowner, and they say, I dedicate this for the sake of this madrasa, or for the sake of that hospital. And what that means is all the revenue generated will run the hospital or run the madrasa. So if you walked into Cairo, Damascus, any Muslim city 800 years ago, 700 years ago, 600 years ago, what you would find is lots and lots and lots of charitable institutions. Hospitals of all sorts, schools for children, schools for the blind, a lodging for widowed women, this thing for the orphan, that thing for the scholars. All of this was run from charity, from community. Islamic civilization was not fond of taxes and governments getting too involved in these things. Government took a little bit and it had to maintain security. What made the civilization thrive was the people. What zakat shows people is if you just organize yourselves with a little bit of your wealth, it can lead to so much success and strength and confidence for your community. When you see that happening, then you want to do more. People, like we have the Zakat Foundation, we only do zakat. People say, well, can I do more? I want to support with more money. People want to do more when they see what's happening. And when the more happens, then the whole society flourishes overnight. It's a whole different kind of world. It's a world of community-led charity. We don't need the governments, we don't need your taxes. We stand strong by ourselves, and we will make our community thrive. And we will make our community a source of pride and a source of leadership for all other communities. If the zakat works, many things happen. It's happened in the past, it can happen again. If you look at the first of these pillars, is the shahadatain. The shahadatain is the key to the system. Because what does the shahadatain mean? It means that whoever utters these two words, he is in the community. Finish. And the Prophet ﷺ stressed, don't ask the questions and don't do this and don't do that. You have to welcome them. And what that means is we can't keep people out. Our duty is to build a system of care and dignity for Muslims and to not keep anyone out. Because if people see this, they will also want a part of this. That's why I call the victory of Islam is through its civilization. And the shahadatain means we can't tell somebody, no, but yesterday you were in the temple. We can't say, but yesterday you were murdering our people. We can't say that. We can't say, yesterday you guys were ruining us with all your nightclubs. We can't say that. If they say it, they are brothers. Finish. It's very powerful again. We don't have the right to own Islam. To say, no, our zakat is not for white people or not for the Sikhs or no, we can't do that. Whoever wants to join the community of faithful, our zakat is for them. And our masajid are theirs just as much as they are ours. That's what I mean by saying this is the civilization. It's these five. And all the triumph of Islam came because these five were looked out for. They were cared for and they gave birth to all the great triumph that took place thereafter. When I reflected on what the fiqh tradition is, I concluded that it's the map of the civilization that the Prophet brought, ﷺ. Because fiqh books don't talk about manners a lot. They don't talk about how to be a nice husband or how to be the good neighbor. That's very important, but that's often in books of hadith and other books. The books of fiqh, they talk about the huquq. What are the rights of people? And what are the institutions you need to fulfill those rights? That's what I call this civilizational map. The reason why I decided to leave the classroom and come into this Zakat Foundation was because if we're not building the civilizational map, then fiqh is not just for teaching. Anything can be taught. Fiqh is not for teaching. Fiqh is to show us how to build something. Fiqh is to show us the way to have izz for the sake of Allah and His Messenger, because that is the izz of Allah and His Messenger. That is the da'wah. When the Prophet ﷺ left the earth, this was his da'wah. It was Islam is triumphant, come and join. It wasn't about sending individuals with the leaflets, the individual da'wah. It was the civilizational da'wah. And that's what led to the one-way conversion within the Holy Lands. And so my only invitation to myself and to all of you is that we have to understand this principle then. In another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Yadullahi ma'al jama'ah, wa inna shaytana la ma'al wahid, wa huwa min al-ithnaini ab'ad. The hand of Allah is with the group. The devil is with the one who's by himself. And the devil is further away when there are two. That is his sunnah. That's why even when they were stopping for the night, he would say, why don't you put your sleeping bags close to each other? Everything was about being close to each other, close to each other, close to each other. That's how Islam is protected. In Surah Al-Asr, a surah that we all recite, what does it say? It says if you want to really make sure your life is successful, you do the good deeds, you believe in Allah, and you make a community. Because the last thing in the surah was وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. They tell each other about the haqq and they help each other have sabr. That is community. So can you see what we owe the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam, what we owe the communities who've given us Islam, our amana that we have to fulfill is building community. That's the amana. It's not just about what's between you and Allah. That's the pillar, that all of us have something between us and Allah. But some of us will be stronger in that than others. So how do we make sure that we're all strengthened? Is that we all connect the dots, connect the nodes. Everyone has to feel that they belong. Even the people who don't want to come to the masjid and they don't want to wear the hijab, or they don't want to do this, they don't want to do that, the pillars are saying they still have a haqq to our zakat. We still have to be there for them. Can you see? The pillars are the wide net. Whoever says the kalimatain and the shahadatain, they're in the net. They have to feel they belong to something. We have to create that belonging. That's our duty and our amana. And if we fulfill it, the victory is ours. That's as simple as that. That's what Allah's promised. If you look at the promises for zakat and salat, they're very, very big promises in the Holy Quran of establishment in the land and all kind of wonderful things. It's here where we have to start thinking. I'll just say a few more words and I'll stop, and then we can take any questions and anything people want to talk about. Then I thought at the end I'll do 10 minutes quickly on how to pay zakat if anyone wants to ask any questions on that as well. In terms of the work that I've started now, so I'll just talk a little bit about that just for your information as well. National Zakat Foundation has been operating for about 11 years. It's the only institution for nationwide collection and distribution of zakat. We currently help people through cash grants for hardship relief, and we believe cash is the most dignified way to help somebody choose for themselves how they wish to take care of their basic needs. We do it through bank transfer. We also do it through post office if people don't have a bank account. We help people with basic support with rent deposits so they can secure accommodation, rent arrears so they don't get kicked out, basic furniture. We do a work support if people are out of work and just to do a course of training, which discuss with them what the best training is so they can get back into work again. Or if they have a training but they don't have tools for their work, we can see if we can support them with getting the tools so they can start working again. And so we have a range of services like this, and the last one is people who are financially struggling but they want to do community service like Islamic scholarship, chaplaincy, counseling, just to support them in that education. So we have this system of support currently happening nationwide. We've recently have people, almost double the amount of Muslims asking for help right now, and the reason is that this cost of living which is currently happening, which is getting harder and harder for people, Muslims, you might not realize it, are being disproportionately affected by this. And the reason for this is, maybe different reasons. Based on the last census, 50% of Muslims are technically in poverty, the way poverty is measured, more than any other community. We are disproportionately represented in the prison population, which is very sad. 5% we are of the general population, and about 15% of the prison population is Muslim. And these are all tied to poverty related issues, because the Prophet ﷺ, he stressed that poverty and kufr are connected. Allahumma ni'adhu bika min kufr wal faqr, because poverty pushes people to desperation and bad company. So these are all connected things that we have to be thinking about as a community. Currently, like I said, Muslims are being disproportionately affected by cost of living issues with the rising energy prices and related. And so we have this concern of how we can raise possibly double the zakat just to see the current need. So in this current moment, I'll encourage you all to at least pay some of your zakat in the UK, because it starts this journey that we've been describing, this connection of what's the need here, what's going on here, how can I help here. If you started with some of your zakat at least, for the sake of the sunnah we've been describing, it's important for all of us. I'll say that for now. In terms of the future, what's the future that I'd like to build with all of your help? Is not no one charity can do this. It's all of us. I'd like to build a future where we don't simply have a zakat service, but we have a zakat system. That every Muslim in this country knows that they're part of a system that will catch them if they are in need. And they're part of a system that they can feed into if they know that there are people in need. That's it. A dignified system of support for Muslims in the country. That I feel is our amana to this pillar called zakat. I think we can do this. The advantage of a system, what I'm keen to do going forwards. Currently NZF is the expert really on this electronic support. You can apply anywhere in the country, get cash anywhere in the country. We're very good nationwide support. What I'd like to build going forwards is to connect with grassroots institutions. Because when you do the electronic support, some people will always be excluded. They don't know how to use the phone, they don't know how to read English, they don't know how to upload PDF, and so on. It's a great service, it's a very forward in many ways, but for the future to happen, I'd like it to be connected to institutions on the ground as well. And the advantage of that is the reach is better, and the other advantage is that you actually build the communities that these pillars are teaching us. That, for example, if someone were to find zakat in this masjid, they'd also find the masjid as well. Maybe they've never bothered coming here, and someone told them, oh, if you're going to get kicked out of your house, don't worry, I heard there's a fund in the masjid for Muslims. They say, oh really? They never probably thought their mind to come to the masjid, and maybe they live on the corner, and they'll come and they'll think, wow, you help them with their rent, and you'll say, yeah, we also have lessons here, but we can teach your kids as well. That's how you make this network of support. When you embed the zakat within our already present grassroots services, and through the zakat we learn our duty of care is for all the mu'mineen. That's it. It's not for us to exclude anyone of the Ahlul Shahadatain. And so that's my intention going forwards. It's a big project. At National Zakat Foundation we have some very good, we've established ourselves very well in the governance space and how to really manage money well and responsibly and transparently. We've got a very good development in the technological space of how to track everything. And I feel that if we were to combine this expertise with the expertise of communities like your own, who have your own projects and networks and people, how can we put our resources together to make sure the message of Islam reaches all of these believers, the message of community. So I'll stop here, but for me this is our amana, this is our duty, this is the most fundamental meaning of Islam, and my strong belief is if we were to come together and serve this in whatever way we can, the future is bright. Because we only have two futures for our children. They either learn about Allah and His Messenger as outcasts, as people that the school and the media is telling them that they're strange and they feel alone, or they can learn about Allah and His Messenger in community, and they know that there's a safe space, and there's a strong number, and there's a dignity here, and we all know that they'll find it much easier to be believers in the second scenario. So that's all. I'll leave you with this message. I'm happy to take any questions or comments or discussion points, and maybe I'll do a quick 10 minutes on how to pay zakat as well if people are interested. But if anyone wants to raise any discussion points, I'm most welcome. Sorry? Okay. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu ta'ala ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Ya Rabbana lakal hamd kama yanbaghi li jalali wajhika wa li azimi sultanik. Subhanaka la nuhsi thana'an alayka anta kama athnayta ala nafsik. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka